We are so glad to welcome you out tonight, even in the cold and the rain and the wind. We're certainly glad you're here. We're going to start out with an opening prayer by Lon Wakefield, and then David Kinder will lead us in a Pledge of Allegiance, and we will go to that point.
Our Father in heaven, we are grateful this day for the opportunity of gathering together to bring to our remembrance the many great and beautiful and wonderful things we have here to partake of in the county, to get together and discuss those things of interest, those things that are history and valuable to us. We pray that as we do those things that we may draw closer to Thee and give thanks unto Thee for all that Thou hast given to us and all of our experiences, all of those things that others have taught us, and we pray that we may learn today something new, that we may gain in knowledge and appreciation. And this we ask in the name of Thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. I mean the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
We have such a fantastic program outlined for you all tonight. We're next going to hear from the Glee Club. They're going to do a few numbers for us, and they are a staple in our county, and they're decreasing in number. So if any of you men are just itching to join the Glee Club, I think you should think about that seriously. I'll turn the time over to Ed.
I'm going to sing two songs that have a bit of history, and hope you have that sheet of paper that gives a little bit of what's behind the songs. Might mention also that this piano has a bit of history. When the Museum of the San Rafael was first built, some of you remember it had a public event space in it. And they decided it would be good to have a piano in that public event space, and so there was quite a fundraising enterprise went to get that, and they were a little short, and so the Glee Club put on a benefit concert, and that's what put the piano over the top. It was in the museum until they changed their policy about public events, and then it was moved here, and Bart Cox had the honor, I think, of being one of those who had to get the piano across the road and up on the second floor. So he has some history with it too.
You did it.
Waiting patiently. I'm going to hide away out beside that Utah trail. Moonlight is bright as day, for along that Utah trail. There's where I'll settle down in peace, where all is still, in a little hut just built for two, tucked away in the heart of the hills. There 'neath the skies of blue, in the golden summertime, out where all friends are true, and all nature is in rhyme. Someone is waiting with a love that never fails, waiting patiently to welcome me for along that Utah trail.
This next song is all Emery County.
Oh, the land that poets sing of, where the maples shade the lane, and the many-colored grasses make the lead, where the youthful lovers wander through the fields of waving grain, near the little white cottage by the sea. Cannot dearer be to any heart than the sage-clad hills of clay, where the meadowlark his springtime message tells, where the sunlight of the morning is awakening the day, and the gold bedecks the castles on the hills. In dear old Castle Valley, with its cottonwoods and sage, and the crystal water flowing in the rills, where the pinyon, pine, and cedar make a garland for each ledge, and the sunset tints the castles on the hills. Far beneath the castle's golden, near the river's winding way, where the canyon breezes breathe the mountain air, is the home of happy boyhood, where with schoolmates I did play, and at mother's knee I learned my infant prayer. As life's sunsets drawing nearer, and old age creeps slowly on, let them choose the peaceful willows, those who will. But the one request I'm making, let me sleep when life is done, in the shadows of the castles on the hills. In dear old Castle Valley, with its cottonwoods and sage, and the crystal water flowing in the hills, where the pinyon, pine, and cedar make a garland for each ledge, and the sunset tints the castles on the hills.
Thank you so very much. That was wonderful. And thank you, Annette. She doesn't get enough attention. I couldn't do it without her, for sure. So when I was a girl growing up, across the street from my home lived the Stokes family. And I looked forward to the summer when their granddaughter would come down to stay for a week or so. She was from Orem, Provo. And she was my age, and we had a lot of fun together. One of the things that I remember from back in that time was because of the Stokes' involvement with the dinosaurs, and you're going to learn about that tonight. I'm so excited to hear that. One day we got to go, Catherine and I. Catherine, wave your hand, because maybe they don't know who you are. Again, they're looking for you. They can't see you. We got to go out to the dinosaur quarry by sitting on the tailgate of a truck. And wiggling our legs, and probably we were coated with dust by the time we got there, but it was fun. It was a wonderful day. So Catherine and I have wanted to have this story told for some time, because as it makes its changes from the Cleveland Lloyd Dinosaur Quarry, which that was kind of a sore spot too, because it should have been the Cleveland Stokes Dinosaur Quarry. But now that it's gone to the Jurassic National Monument, we've totally lost all the connection. So tonight you're going to hear the real story, and I know that you're going to really enjoy it. So our presenter tonight is Allan Staker, who is the nephew of William Lee Stokes. He is also Catherine's brother. So I want to tell you just a little bit about Allan, and then I'm going to turn the time over to him. Allan Staker was born in Price in 1944. His father had been drafted into the Army. Following the war, his family lived in Cleveland and Huntington for several years and then moved to Provo. There he attended school, graduating from Provo High School in 1962. During the summers of 59 to 61, he worked excavating dinosaurs in the Cleveland Lloyd Dinosaur Quarry in Emery County. After serving a mission for the LDS Church, he graduated from BYU with a degree in geology, having been inspired to pursue that profession by his uncle, Dr. William Lee Stokes, a prominent Utah geologist. After graduation, he moved to Denver, Colorado, where he was hired by the Amical Production Company. Following several years working as a petroleum exploration geologist, he was employed by other different oil companies, first as a geologist, then vice president, finally as president and COO of a company based in Denver with financial ties to New York with Wall Street investors. He semi-retired at the age of 48 and moved to southern Utah near Zion's National Park, where he and his wife, Christy, pursued real estate ventures, developing several retirement vacation properties in Springdale, Utah, where he currently makes his home. Allan and Christy maintain an avid interest in all things geological, especially pertaining to dinosaurs and dinosaur tracks. Please welcome Allan and Christy Staker.
Well, I'd like to know that fella. It's a real pleasure to be here tonight and to share some thoughts with you. First of all, let me say how impressed I am with the proceedings to this point. Opening with a prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance and the Glee Club and everything that goes with it, and the friendliness that exists in this group. We sat downstairs waiting, after we set up a little bit, waiting for a while, and the DMV never had a line more than one person. Where we come from, you waited in line for hours, so maybe we got to change our ways and move here. I'm happy to be here with you, and I'm impressed with what is happening. I feel like a bit of an imposter to come from out of state, or out of the county, to come here and tell you folks about something that's in your own backyard. And you've probably been there more times than I have in recent years. I spent a lot of time as a youth, but I haven't been there much lately, and I hope you all have been. I'd like to start, and I've got a point in doing this, by asking, are there many veterans in the audience tonight? Would you raise your hand? Okay, we've got one veteran, and we've probably got other families who have many veterans in the family. I just learned of one up here in the front row. Could you tell me, sir, what branch you served in and what you did?
Well, I started out the 82nd Airborne, and then I served with the 196th Americal in Vietnam as a machine gunner in the infantry.
Okay, impressive. Thank you. And you had a connection to the Army, you told me.
Air Force. My father was a
Air
colonel
Force.
in the Air Force. He
Col-
flew
Go ahead.
B-17s.
You
He flew B-17s.
B-17s.
Yeah, all over Germany.
Okay.
World
So,
War II.
so my point in doing this is to say that I heard recently someone asked that question, and each veteran in turn stood up and told about what their war was. What was their war like? Even though they were in the military at the same time, their experiences were all different. Now, I was in Vietnam, but my experience was different from this man's. I had a mate. He was a gunner in an airship. I mean, he took fire, he gave fire. I was an officer in the back office interpreting aerial photographs. I never saw a shot fired in anger, never saw anyone get killed or even hurt. So my experience in my war was different from his experience in his war. Tonight I'm going to tell you about my experience with the dinosaur quarry. My war was different, maybe perhaps, than your war, your experience. And so I'd like to just explain it and tell you about the way I saw it, the way it developed as I was there. So it's my pleasure to be here with you. Now, if technology will cooperate, we will see. So the dinosaur quarry
Good.
Yeah, good. Now I can't see. No, go ahead and turn it off. Turn it off. I'm good. Yeah.
Do you want both off or just the?
Well, both. Yeah, so they can see the screen. Yeah. So I'm sure you're aware. I hope you're aware of the dinosaur quarry that's here in your backyard.
Oh, yeah.
It is very, very impressive. It's a very, very significant quarry in the history of the world and the history of fossil collections and paleontology. Cleveland Lloyd Quarry is the most dense bed of dinosaur bones in the world. Did you realize that? It has been taken over 15,000 bones have been collected from the quarry. Includes 48 Allosaurus individuals, from juveniles to fully mature critters. This is a one-of-a-kind quarry at any place in the world. I'm happy to have been associated with it. Besides the Allosaurus, there were 11 other species found in the quarry, and display skeletons have been sent all over the world. Questions remain about why it is like it is, why the bones were there, and the different way they were deposited and excavated. And we'll get into that in a few minutes. So the Allosaurus is the most prominent dinosaur in the quarry. It's the Utah state fossil. It lived during the Jurassic times, about 156 to 145 million years ago. How many of you were there?
I was somewhere.
Somewhere. They're found in the Morrison Formation, 28 to 39 feet long. They weighed 2,000 to 3,000 pounds. And I'm told that's about the weight of a good horse. Is that right? A good workhorse. So just imagine a workhorse up on its hind legs and, with its pointy claws and sharp teeth coming after you. That's about the weight of a good car also. Pretty incredible. The bones were deposited when times were different. And we talk all the time about climate change, about the temperature rising and so on. You have to be a time traveler to realize what the times were like when the Allosaurus lived and died. He lived in a coastal plain area. They lived near the sea, in warm lagoonal waters. There were plants growing all around, palm trees and so on. And one of the most important facts or matters was that this happened in volcanic mud. It was very slippery. How many of you have been out on the San Rafael Swell after a rainstorm in a two-wheel drive pickup? I'm surprised you made it back, because you know how slippery and greasy that is. And I think this played a part in why the dinosaurs were trapped and died there. Mighty Allosaurus skeletons are shipped around the world, from Princeton to London, Japan, Price belongs in that list, Paris and Price, New York, Italy, and Seattle, as well as other places. There are about 20 Allosaurus skeletons on display around the world. And did you know that most skeletons you see in most museums are mostly plaster or replacement parts? But we're lucky enough to have enough bones from Allosaurus that most of the skeletons on display are actually the bone material, with a few missing pieces filled in with plaster replicas. So the excavation and chapters and the excavation history of the quarry is very interesting. It probably started in about the 1880s, when local cowboys might have found some bones. Now, I've wondered about this, and I wondered, what did people know about dinosaurs in the 1880s? The people who were, they were just settling this land. They were frontiersmen. They didn't have libraries and internet and Google searches and so on. And they undoubtedly found some bones. We'll reference that in a few minutes. But what did they think when they found bones just lying on the surface? Some leg bones 6 feet long, some teeth, some fossilized teeth and claws, and hand bones, and so on. What in the world did they think they'd found? I wish I could go back in time and understand what the situation was at that time. In the 1920s and through 1931, the University of Utah secured about 500 bones from that area. And they did it just by scratching on the surface. Bones were kicked up and they were readily available. They didn't have to do much digging. I just can't even imagine that scene when they came upon all those bones. And then word went back to the University of Utah, and a man named Golden York came down and collected all of these bones. In 1929, a man named Lewis Owen Buffmore. Does that name mean anything to anybody here?
Yeah. Dave Timothy had a Buckmeyer that lived. Lou Buckmeyer lived with him for a while. And David Timothy's wife was Alice Stokes. And that's my grandmother's sister.
Probably cousins.
Yes, it was William D. Stokes.
Oh.
And yours is William P.?
William P. Stokes.
You know the story of how they got that name, the initials?
I do not.
Well, after this, I'll tell you.
All right. I want to hear it. At any rate, this Lewis Owen Buffmeyer notified Lee's father about the site. This is the first reference we have that's a real recording of information that Lee really had. In 1938 to 1942, Princeton University conducted work at the quarry under the direction of Lee. And in 1960 to 64, the University of Utah also had a dig, and that's the one that I was associated with. And we collected over 12,000 bones in that period of time. From 1966 to 1985, the Bureau of Land Management established the visitor center there. And then in 2019, the area was designated as a national monument. And so the government runs it, and they have complete control of it. And I didn't have much to do with this, much after number 5. In 1964, I was kind of done, and then it was moved on to other people. So I don't know much about the history during that period of time. So the 4 collection eras were these. The first, the cowboy era that we talked about. Second was the University of Utah quarry in 1928, 29, and 31. The third was Princeton University, 1938 to 42, and the fourth was the University of Utah dig from 1960 to 64. Now this first era of the cowboys happened, as we've said, in the 1880s, during the first exploration of any kind in the swell. That's probably the first time cattlemen went out there, and sheepmen and so on. I'm sure that as they went out there, these cattlemen and sheep herders knew what bones were. They'd seen dead critters, dead sheep, dead deer, dead horses, dead lots of things. And so they knew bones, but they didn't know big black bones with a femur the size of my body, 6 feet long. So they found these strange bones on the surface, and there's no evidence that they reported it to anybody associated with the Stokes family or with Lee Stokes. So as the cowboys rode around, they may have seen some bones like these. You see the vertebra going through the middle of the photo there. They're huge vertebra. If you compare that with the size of a human vertebra, which is this size, these are basketball-sized vertebra. What do you suppose they thought they were? And that's something I don't have an answer for, but I would really like to know. So the second era in the 1920s was sponsored by the University of Utah. This is when Lee first got involved, Lee Stokes, and we're going to talk a little more about him. Lee was in his 20s, or in his teens when this era happened. A young boy, he was 14 or so when he first started this. Think when you were 14, what were you doing? Scientific expeditions? Heck no, I don't know what I was doing, I forgot. So interesting facts about the 20s. In the course of three seasons, Golden York uncovered and collected 500 bones. These went to the University of Utah. An average Allosaurus, by the way, has about 300 bones. You've got to have all 300 to make the complete skeleton. He had 500 that were kind of a mismatch. We'll talk about that in a minute. But he discovered and found out that these bones had superior preservation. There was nothing like them anywhere. And I can confirm that when I was there in the 60s, the bones almost fall out of the clay, almost fall out of the shale. Places like Dinosaur National Monument, the bones are embedded in sandstone and hard rock, and they have to be chipped out with a chisel. But we worked with a little ice pick and a little whisk broom. You pick a little bit and brush it away, and all once there was a bone, and you had to identify it, know what it was, and so on. So this expedition validated the quality of the quarry, and many people took note of it, and Lee was involved in that, and so he did as well. So Lee was born in 1915, and when these things in the 1920s happened, he was, like I said, in his early teens. He died in 1994. He was born in Hiawatha, and you all know where that is, right? And his family moved to Cleveland when he was about 2 or 3 years old. But he collected rocks as a young boy. His dad would frequently send him out on the family horse to go out and scout where the cattle were out on the mountain. And he'd come back with a saddlebag full of pretty rocks. And his dad would say, well, where are the cattle? Oh, I didn't see any cattle. But look at these rocks. And he did that time and time again and had piles of rocks in his yard. Word got around from these cowboys that there was a young boy in Cleveland who liked rocks. So they would tell him the stories about what they had found. That boy knew about rocks. He went on to get a geology degree, 2 degrees from BYU, and then he got a PhD from Princeton. So he was responsible for taking the Cleveland Lloyd Quarry from a site with curious fossils to the most incredible quarry in the world. Maybe somebody else could have also done it, but he did it. He was there, he was on the ground, and he was the motor behind all of this. During World War II, he worked for the government looking for uranium to contribute to the atomic era that was coming and happened in World War II. He later on became known as the father of Utah geology, a very, very prominent person. He was chairman of the geology department at the University of Utah for many years. He wrote many scientific papers. He was the author of a lot of talks on geology and scientific matters. He did a lot of incredible things. An additional honor given to Dr. Stokes was that there was a dinosaur named after him called the Stokesasaurus clevelandi, and it's only fitting. Now, I've never seen one of these, so I don't know if this is really what it looked like, even though this is an actual photograph. So he published many things, including this book about the quarry, the Cleveland Lloyd Dinosaur Quarry, Window to the Past. And in it, there's information about the quarry. He gives credits to a lot of people who were involved in the quarry, and he lists 32 people by name, and I'm one of the 32, and I'm proud to be a part of that. I knew about half of them, and the other half, I guess, worked in the bone barn. They called it up in Salt Lake and in Provo. There were many others along the way that helped with this in some degree, some way or another, and that would be their war or their experience. What I'm talking about tonight is my war and my experience, and I don't want to leave anybody out that may have been involved in it. I don't know, but if you had something to do with it, I'd like to hear some more about it. To know what Lee was like, I think you have to kind of know his parents. William P. Stokes was Lee's father, William P. Stokes was born in Eureka in 1888. He was a miner and a farmer. He moved the family bought a small farm in Cleveland, moved from Eureka, and that's where William Peace lived and had his farm. And like a lot of farmers during that time, he had to have a job in the mines to support the farm. Mm-hmm. Farm didn't generate much money, so he worked as a miner, and you know how long and hard the miners worked. It was quite an ordeal. And he sent Lee out on horseback to search for the cows, and this is when the story comes in about the pretty rocks. But Lee didn't know where the cows were. So the father, William Peace, told Lee, he said, "You'll never be successful as a miner or a farmer. You better find some other way to make a living." And here's Lewis Owen Buffmeyer again, who told him kind of where these bones were to be found. Now when Lee was 18 or 19, he went up to Provo to go to attend BYU, and when he arrived there, he told the people at the university, whoever the people are, he said, "I'm here to get an education, and I have $25 to invest in it." And the person there said, "Young man, if that's all you have is $25, you better turn around and go right back home." Somehow he managed to stick it out, and he got 2 degrees from BYU. So his father was kind of a hardscrabble sort of guy, and we'll talk more about him in a minute. So his mother was Grace Elizabeth Cox Stokes. Now notice there was a Mr. Cox in the audience tonight. So we're probably cousins. Hi, cousin. Yeah, I suspect I'm related to more people here than we really know right off the bat, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud of my Emery County roots. As I said earlier, I don't live here, haven't been here much in a lot of years, but I'm still proud of it. When everybody asks me where I'm from, I always say Emery County. And they say, "Where?" And I explain it. But I'm proud of that. His mother was born in Farron in 1888. And she was a school teacher in Elmo. She had a small collection of books, so therefore she was the town librarian. She taught Lee how to read at an early age. And Lee was fascinated by the large lizards in the books that he saw pictures of. And he didn't know any more about dinosaurs than the cowboys did. So we called them dinosaurs from reading in the book, dinosaur. He didn't know the word dinosaur. So they all kind of learned together, I think. So she was refined and a very lovely lady. His dad was a hardscrabble guy. Together they raised a brilliant guy and a brilliant family. And my mother was Lee's sister. Grant Stokes, we're going to get to in a minute, was his brother who worked in the quarry. And then Marion Stokes was his sister. And she lived in Huntington for many years and ran the market there and other things. So let's talk about the third era, and that's the Princeton era in the 1940s. Lee was 25 years old when he entered Princeton in 1940. When he got there, he discovered that the school had an excellent geological museum, but they had no dinosaur. And they said they just couldn't afford to have a dinosaur skeleton. At that time, it was too rich for their blood. It would cost $50,000 to get a dinosaur. Well, Lee scratched his head and he said, "You know what?" He said, "I can do it a little cheaper than that. If you can get me $1,000, I'll go get a dinosaur skeleton for you." So the school didn't have $1,000, but a young recent graduate in the law school from a wealthy family named Malcolm Lloyd stepped forward and was intrigued by the idea. He said, "I'll give you $1,000. And so that $1,000 stretched, and Lee came west, collected the bones, sent them back to Princeton. And that's why the quarry is called the Cleveland Lloyd Quarry, because of this one-time involvement by Malcolm Lloyd. He never ever came west. He never saw the quarry, but he was the financial means to make it happen in the beginning. So part of the field crew in that Princeton era was Grant Stokes, who was Lee's younger brother, and Grant shows up in the 1960s quarry also, and also Don Hansen, two good friends. There's some more 1940s trivia. The bones were shipped from the quarry to Price in a Model T Ford, and it looked a lot like this one. It was actually called a roadster pickup. That means the top comes down, it's kind of an open air convertible with a pickup bed on the back. In the 1920s You could buy Model Ts in lots of configurations, but this is the one that they used to ship the bones from the quarry to Price. This particular Model T that they used belonged to William P. Stokes. He bought it in 1926 from Price for $500. And they used this Model T, as I said, to haul the bones. Now they were shipping the bones in a way that you may be familiar. Have you ever seen a box like this? Everybody here has probably got a couple in their basement, right, or their garage. This is an explosives box that came from the mines, and they were plentiful and they were free back in this era when all the people were working in the mines. So that's what they used for shipping the bones. So Princeton got its Allosaurus. It was mounted in Guyot Hall, dug up in the 1940s, but mounted in 1960. It took all that time. The war intervened and other things happened. It didn't get it mounted until 1960. Now, William P. Stokes was not much of a mechanic. He liked to plow his fields the old-fashioned way with some horses. But he thought, well, I'm going to try this newfangled thing that I bought and paid all that money for, but I can't start it. So he hitched it up to a horse, and the horse started pulling it down the lane. And the first of the car just dug in, and as it turned over once or twice, the car backfired, bam! And the horse went this way, and the car went that way, and the car went into the shed. And Grandpa used the horse from then on. Now I remember as a boy going to that shed and seeing this Model T up on blocks, and I'd sit there and I'd play with the accelerator and the spark advance and push the horn button, which it doesn't work. There was no battery or anything. And sit on the old coils, the metal coils. The upholstery was gone, but just pretend like I was driving that Model T. Guess what? There's more to the story. And this is a 1925 interesting fact. That very Model T Ford is still in the family. I have the very car that he bought new in 1926. It's almost 100 years old now. And over the years, I've refurbished it and fixed it up, and it's been in lots of parades. And in Denver, we hauled the manager of the professional baseball team in a parade in it, and other people have enjoyed it, and I get a real kick out of it. It's really fun to have the old Model T that William P. Stokes bought 100 years ago. So the funding for the 1940s dig, I've already told that story. Malcolm Lloyd donated the money. The price was $50,000, and about 1,500 bones were collected from that dig. Mr. Lloyd never visited the quarry. Well, the fourth era, we've moved right along here, in the 1960s, was sponsored by the University of Utah. It was a cooperative dig. And students from other universities helped out for short periods of time. Cooperative dig means that Lee was smart enough to know that probably the university couldn't fund the cost of doing an excavation all summer. So he went to other universities, and he enlisted 5 other universities to pay $2,000 apiece to have a $10,000 pot to go have a field crew collect more bones. And he was successful in organizing that. The quarry was opened from 1960 to 1964. 12,000 bones were recovered, and the crew size was between 4 and 6, depending on various things. We had world-class dino diggers there. Stony Burke was there. Lee Stokes is by the green umbrella. Grant Stokes is under the shade of the umbrella. It was so hot and the direct sun was too intense, so we had these beach umbrellas that we sat under and worked at. Grant Stokes was an indispensable member and leader of the quarry and of the expedition. He participated in the 1940s and in the 1960s. He kept the time cards. He was the purser. He built a prefab cabin, and I'll show you a picture of it in a minute. He taught digging techniques. He'd learned how to dig and wrap bones in a plaster cast for shipping. He learned that during the Princeton era, and he helped us do it during the University of Utah era. Wonderful guy. So springtime was not the best in the quarry. This on the left is a picture of Mike Stokes, who is Lee's son. He's got a shovel dug in the side of the hill there, and on that shovel he's got a hat with mosquito netting. boy, believe me, the no-see-um flies and gnats were out. They would find every orifice in your body. They'd fly in your ear, in your nose, and everything to gnat you. Drove us all nuts. This other picture is me holding a vertebra about this big. You can't see it because it's kind of the same color as the shale, but it was life in the quarry. So loading, there's Mike Stokes again. He's holding up 2 dinosaur claws, as you can see. And Jim Madsen and Stoney are helping to load bones in wooden shipping crates into the back of his Ford to be hauled to Salt Lake. They didn't like the fact that I was just taking the pictures. Here's a quarry view, a couple of quarry views. The quarry was kind of disorganized a lot of times. We'd dig a little bit with our ice pick and brush a pile of dirt over here. Pretty soon that accumulated, got in the way, more piles, more dirt, more piles, more dirt. And so it was kind of hard to keep it tidy with 3 or 4 guys doing all that all the time. The bottom picture is a picture from up on the hill called Raptor Point. And you can look down and see the prefab cabin that Grant built on site there. And then the actual quarry was off down in the gully, just barely out of the picture. So bone shipping in the 1960s, we kept maps of where all the bones came from. You can see in the top circle there, you probably can't really see it, but every bone we found was drawn on a grid map, so we'd know where it came from. And I'll tell you in a minute, but I'll tell you now. The bones were disarticulated, which means they were never found together. You never found a hand with all the bones in position. You'd find a finger bone, then you'd find a claw, then you'd find a skull part, then you'd find a leg bone. There was no association whatsoever as we dug and found these bones, and even not so as we looked at the map afterwards. And this map was carried on for 3 or 4 years. And so you'd think if you could see multiple levels and multiple areas, you'd see some bones associated together, but that just never happened. So the bones were added to the quarry map, then they were wrapped carefully, and guess what? They were still shipped in some wooden boxes. Somehow they were able to get some Cutty Sark wooden boxes for the using. So the quarry was like a giant jigsaw puzzle. Imagine with me, if you can, 15 picture puzzles with 1,000 pieces each being mixed together, yielding 15,000 pieces. How many of you have done a puzzle, 1,000-piece puzzle? It's hard to do even one, let alone mixing 15 together. Imagine the pieces that scattered through your house. Some in the living room, some in the bedroom, some in the kitchen, some in the garage. Imagine half were carried out with the trash on Wednesday. Imagine being confined to the bathroom, gathering pieces that the dog had chewed, and assembling what you've gathered together. Imagine how lucky you'd be to find enough pieces to be able to see the picture, to even know what it looked like. Welcome to the wonderful world of dinosaur collecting. That's the way it was. They had all these bones, 300 bones per animal, per critter, and now we've excavated a total of between 12 and 15,000 bones, and that yields somewhere around 40, I think, if you do the math. And we know they were from different animals because they sorted the bones out, and they wanted to pick one particular bone that would be easily identified, and if they found 2 of that bone, they'd know they had 2 critters. So they chose the left femur of the Allosaurus, and it turns out they had 42 left femurs. And then they started building around that. They take the pieces, and they were from juvenile size to full size grown. And as we talked earlier, these were reptiles, and sometimes they just kept growing and growing and growing. Unlike us, we have upper limits, except parts of us. But the dinosaurs did not have upper limits on their size. They just grew and grew and grew until they got old, and they couldn't move as fast as the young guy. The young guy got the scraps, the meal, and so the old guy died. So the bones, okay, we just went through this. No particular arrangement, none were articulated. The bone layer was about 4 to 6 feet deep, and we dig it in little layers about 6 inches at a time, 6 inches all the way across the quarry floor, then take the bones out as we found them, then take another 6-inch lift until we got from top to bottom. The smaller bones, there was one thing that stood out. The smaller bones, like the finger bones and claws and so on, were near the top of the pay dirt. And the pay dirt was a shale layer, which is 4 to 6 feet deep. And above that, in most of the area where the quarry is, there was a limestone layer of 6 to 8 to 12 inches thick. And that's almost impenetrable with an ice pick. You'd have to use a sledgehammer and heavy equipment to get that overburden out of the way so you can get down to where the shale was and where the bones would come out. The larger bones, the big bones, were near the bottom. And most of the bones, as I've said before, were of magnificent museum quality. I don't think there are any bones from anywhere in the world that are of the same quality that came out of this quarry. Certainly none that I've seen. Skull bones were the most fragile. They required plaster cast protection before they could be shipped. So at one time we gathered together just for photographic purposes the bones. We just happened to have enough to replicate a foot. So these are metatarsals, foot bones, and finger bones, and foot claws, just put together in the way that they would fit on an animal. And this is about 18 inches long, something like that. Pretty good sized foot. And we were talking earlier with someone about a stegosaurus tail spike. These two spikes are just what I just said. They were tail spikes from a stegosaurus. And you can see if some animals flipping those around, it would be a formidable battle. So we talked about funding in the 1960s, and we already kind of went over that. James H. Madsen, a graduate student who you saw in the picture with the bone crate, helped organize the effort, and he became very prominent in examining the bones and putting it together, drawing conclusions and so on after they were all shipped to Salt Lake City. 5 museums contributed to that effort. We had some interesting visitors come to the quarry. Almost every day somebody would drive out there, and it was a long, dirty, dusty road. It wasn't as improved as it is now, but they would show up and they'd walk over and we'd take turns telling people about what was there, what they could see. Many times the bones were freshly put away and packaged, and there was nothing to see and they were disappointed. Sometimes even when we had bones on display, they were disappointed because they expected to see a dinosaur rise up on its hind legs or something, when they got there. But 2 notable people came to the quarry. In the car, in the Chevy, was a writer and a photographer from National Geographic. Lee invited him to come out and write about the quarry and hoped it would show up in the magazine National Geographic. But it didn't, because the guy said it just wasn't colorful enough. And I guess that's true when you look at the old gray shale out there. There's not a whole lot of color. And the other fellow, finishing up the plaster cast, is Jim Jensen. He was associated with one of the Ivy League schools back east, and he came west and came to our quarry specifically to see what was happening there because he'd heard about it. He was a prominent paleontologist, and he went to BYU and said, "You got to hire me. I want to work on all these bones." So they in fact did. He became known as Dinosaur Jim, and he got a lot of press and publicity in the 70s and the 80s. He's gone now. He's moved on. So one thing that we did, rather than just hear the same old jokes from each other every day about digging dinosaurs, however funny that may be, we had a portable radio, and every morning at 10 o'clock, just to lighten up the mood, we'd turn on the radio and we'd dial in KOAL on your dial. Now, is that still a radio station?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. They were a very small station, 250 watts, 1450 to 1230 on your dial, one or the other. It changed around a little. And it served Carbon and Emery County, gave the news, sports, and weather. We like to know about the weather. How hot is it going to be? How much variety is there in that? And it gave the mine report twice a day. Juarez is open, Hiawatha is open, and so on. How many remember the mine reports and all of those things? Yeah. And that was our only source of news out there, but we enjoyed it. We liked to listen to it. And the broadcast studio is right there on the highway between Price and Helper. Have you seen, is it still there? I don't even know.
Yes.
Yeah. Is it still in business? Yeah, okay. So at 10 o'clock, the Breakfast Club would come on with Don McNeil. Who's heard of the Breakfast Club? Good old days. So every day for 1 hour, we'd listen to that. And Don would have all of his people march around the breakfast table once every quarter hour. First, second, and third, and fourth call to breakfast. They'd have talk and comedy and music, and that was on the air for 35 years. And it's funny how some things still stick with you after all that time. Also, at KOAL, they had some programs that people made fun of. They had the afternoon teen tune time when they played the bubblegum songs. And most of the guys working in the quarry didn't care about that very much. And then they had the polka hour occasionally. And they'd turn that on, and the digging would liven up a little bit, and we'll have a little bit more fun. We went through a lot of batteries doing that. So KOAL went on the air, went off the air at sundown, and returned at sunup. That was one of the rules for that size of the station. At night, we'd turn on a portable radio, transistor radio, and we could hear distant stations. And to us, that was magical back then. We could hear KOA in Denver, KFI in Los Angeles, KOB in Albuquerque, KOMA in Oklahoma City, KSL in Salt Lake. And it was just wonderful to hear those distant signals coming in. And they'd have different kinds of programs at night depending on the channel. These were all 50,000 watt clear channel stations. And that was a little portable transistor radio we used. So after, back to the quarry, that's why you're here. After all these little piles of dirt got in the way, Grant devised a way to move those little piles of dirt. Somewhere he found this implement called a Fresno. I don't know where he got it, one of the local farms somewhere. Meant to be used and pulled by a horse. Well, he hooked his Jeep up to it. And when you pull this Fresno around, you'd pull the handle down. There I am riding on the second picture. You pull the handle up, pull the handle down, just like a scoop, like a big front loader. And you'd pull it around in a circle, and pull it up, pull the handle up, and it would dump its load, and you could smooth out all the dirt. So around and around we went to get the quarry all smoothed out. Once in a while, the county grader would come out and smooth out all the washboard and the rocks and in the road. And our camp life, this invitation was partly to talk about life in the quarry, besides the lead up to the quarry. These are some of the things that we did. In the evening, we foolishly jumped from rock to rock. We're lucky to get a good picture of that right before the ambulance came. And we had a couple of camp dogs. That was kind of fun to play with them and feed them. And for a while, we had the camp horse. And that was fun until the horse got away one day. And none of us were watching, and we had to chase the horse all over the county. Finally found it miles away. It was headed home back to Cleveland. It was some 12 miles out there. The horse knew the way, and we didn't. And one day there was a pond, a dry pond that had mud cracks in the top of it. Little did I know the crack, mud was only about this thick, about an inch thick. And underneath it was all this bentonite, this wet, slippery bentonite. I was riding the horse, and I thought, well, I'll just ride across this little pond, no big deal. Well, it took about 3 steps, and he was in up to his belly, all 4 legs. It was all we could do to get him to turn around and make his way out. So that's leading up to one of the things I think caused the demise of the dinosaur. I think that it was a slippery pond back then, just like it would be now. And I've seen videos on YouTube of baby elephants trying to climb out of a slippery mud hole in Africa. And they couldn't even get out with the help of their mother. Finally, they were able to do that, finally to pull themselves out. And I think maybe that's what happened to the Allosaurus. This was a slippery, volcanic mud, a goop, and they just couldn't, once they fell in chasing their next meal, they became the meal for the one after that. And they just couldn't survive. Another thing we did in the camp was of course, examine the night sky, which was wonderful. I was a Boy Scout, so I was working on my astronomy merit badge. And this is an actual photograph of one of the star symbols we saw. So it wasn't all sun and gnats all the time. A couple of times we had massive rainstorms, and this was just the gully between the little prefabricated cabin and the actual quarry, and you can see it filled up with a lot of water. It was really flowing down there. And the quarry was just over the hill where the next gully was, and it got totally inundated with water over there. So we had to shut it down for a while we tried to get the water out and let it dry out. And somehow I was elected to stay. I think I stayed a week there by myself while the sun helped to dry it out. And when it finally got better, the rest of the quarry workers came back. We had 5-star accommodations. We had World War II equipment right here. I'm taking a drink out of water in a paper cup. Next to me is something called a Lister bag. How many of you have ever heard of that? Lister bag. It's a canvas bag that's designed to leak a little bit, and as it leaks, the outside evaporates, the water evaporates and cools the water a little bit, from 150 to 120 or something like that. And we had a generator that we ran at night occasionally for lights and other things. In the cabin, we had propane. We had a propane stove, propane oven, and a propane fridge. And I still don't get how you light a fire under a fridge and make things cold in there. Can you explain that to me later? Early on at the quarry, they only had, and I wasn't here for this part of that summer, they only had a tent to sleep in, so that was quite primitive. And then there are 2 more pictures of the cabin that we had. Fun in the sun. Grant's wondering how hot that temperature really is. And Mike's over there not caring what it is, he's just having a little nap. So, concluding, my nominations for awards are as follows. The GOAT Award, greatest of all time dinosaur, goes to Allosaurus. The GOAT Award, greatest of all time dinosaur burial ground, Cleveland Lloyd Quarry. The GOAT Award, greatest of all time dinosaur Allosaurus expert. I didn't talk a whole lot about him, but he's quite a magnificent guy. He's passed on. James Madsen. And Lee Stokes was a key person. He was involved in the quarry from the 20s through the 70s. He had the vision of the cooperative dig. He assembled funding universities to make the dig possible. He had the foresight to know early on that there was an abundance of bones to be collected. Therefore, greatest of all time award, GOAT Award, for Allosaurus hunter goes to William Lee Stokes. Thank you very much. That's my war, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Thank you. Oh, okay. Yes, so Val wonders if there are any questions. Questions, comments, or smart remarks?
Who is the geologist from Colorado?
Well, that would be me. There are lots of geologists in Colorado.
Because I remember meeting you several years ago.
I don't know who that would be.
Must have been you then.
Well, I did a thorough job in educating everyone if there are no questions.
Were there predator skeletons that are mixed in with the, I mean, like, you know, saber-toothed tigers or those other kinds, or was it all?
So were there other predators mixed in with the Allosaurus bones like the saber-toothed tiger? Well, the saber-toothed tiger lived about 120 million years after the Allosaurus.
Yeah.
So the answer to that is no. But there were other animals, there were other species mixed in there, including the Brontosaurus or Apatosaurus, because we found a couple of leg bones, as I mentioned, that were as long as my body is, 6 feet long.
Now, tell them why there's no such thing as a Brontosaurus.
Well, there's no such thing as a Brontosaurus because in scientific nomenclature, the person who names the animal or the critter first gets to name it. And in this case,
And that name doesn't change.
someone found what they was a large sauropod, large long neck, long tail, big femored animal. They found it and they thought they were the first, and so they called it a brontosaurus.
Well, they thought
Later
it was
on-
bigger than the brontosaurus.
Later on, another person said, hey, I discovered that same animal. It has all the same characteristics. I discovered it and I named it first. It's really an apatosaurus. So you can't call it a brontosaurus. So there was a great war about that, and we still call it brontosaurus. And very few people know the name apatosaurus.
There's no such thing as brontosaurus. And then there was a case where they put the wrong head on a dinosaur in a museum.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember?
Well, early on, even when they started collecting the bones, and someplace in England or wherever, they collected a lot, and they didn't know what these things were because they just found a few scattered bones, and they could identify it as a leg bone or an arm bone or some vertebra or something, and they put the things together, and they made it look like a cootie bug. You know what a cootie bug is? Yeah, with his arms and legs spread way out instead of like this, like a tight little meat-eating guy. So it took a while for all of this to take place, to really develop the whole concept of the dinosaurs.
It was kind of a young person who discovered that the head was on the wrong dinosaur.
Yeah, I don't doubt that.
Like a 19-year-old who studied them.
And there was what was called the Great Bone Wars that happened in Colorado and Wyoming. Marsh and Coe. Yeah, were both out collecting, and then they were running into each other, and they were trying to steal each other's bones. And I always thought that would make a great movie. You know, somebody ought to write a screenplay about that.
They didn't document things well. Those two men did.
They didn't. Yeah, but those states are great places for collecting. Colorado and Wyoming and even Montana, up into Alberta and Canada, there's some great collecting. But there's no quarry in the world that has the density of bones that this goat, this greatest of all time quarry has. Yes, another question?
So what's going on with the quarry nowadays?
Okay, well, that's a good question, and we'll call our people at the BLM and at the government to fill us in, because I really don't know. I haven't really kept up on that since my period ended in 1960. So we have maybe some information here on the front row.
Well, I've got mostly ignorance. There are plans. They intend to build a large building covering the area where the two work sheds are now, and a larger area there. And so mainly, that will, in some degree, facilitate the scientific work, but I think it's mainly to make a more presentable experience for visitors. And the construction on that may begin this summer. Nobody in the government knows what anything is going to happen any time now, but it may begin this summer. So there's that under plan. If you've been out the roads, the signposts are much better, more abundant than they were now. And another thing I like is that beginning several miles from the quarry, where you cross the Farron Sandstone, they've put interpretive signs along telling you what formation you're in, the formation, the date, and then a illustration of one of the animals that lived at that period. So it's kind of fun as you go there. You're able to kind of see how you're moving back in time. So they're going, and of course the quarry isn't it? It is the Cleveland Lloyd Dinosaur Quarry. That is its name. That's not changing. The National Monument does include a somewhat large, not a large monument, but includes a little more area to kind of get to bring all of that formation together within it. And I think as they go along, they've got some really nice hiking trails where you can go and some of the perspectives you hiked up to go, you can now walk on a path and get up there and take your picture. So they're doing some good things in that respect. But But one of the real problems, of course, is that probably worse in our time has ever been. Nobody knows what happened last year. Nobody knows what a previous generation did unless we got somebody like you who can come and fill that in. So that's that kind of the kind of connective tissue that you've been able to provide us, I think, has been extremely valuable. And I'm sorry the BLM people weren't here, but I guess we've got a recording. Maybe we can get, because it's.
Well, I'm honored to be here, and I'm not sure how much I've added to your understanding and your knowledge, but my experience was 65 years ago. I can't believe, I've arrived at that ripe old age. 65 years since I did some of this stuff. So
you're a young guy.
Yeah, I'm the young guy in the ward, in the audience. As far as the quarries go, the Cleveland Lloyd Quarry was an excavation place to gather bones, and they were very successful at that. Dinosaur National Monument is a display thing. They've got the building built all over the formation. They've got some bones exposed, and they've been that way for 100 years, and they will never change. But the Cleveland Lloyd is kind of dynamic. They've done some core drilling out around where the excavation area has taken place so far, and they found bone remnants 20 feet, 40 feet away. So it's much bigger than what we even see now. It's over here.
Come off to the side there. In Lee's book on Utah geology, he defines what he calls gastroliths. Can you explain what those are? What they really are?
Yes. Well, I'm not sure I can explain what they really are, but I'll tell you what he says. Gastroliths, or gastro meaning stomach, lith meaning rock, are stones that were supposedly found in the stomachs of dinosaurs. When they were eating food or whatever, sometimes they would gobble up some rocks with the greenery that they were eating.
I found some.
Yes, okay, and it's easy to find them sometimes if you're in the right place to look for them. And they would stay in the stomach, and they would grind together with everything else in there, and they would put a particular patina or polish on these rocks. And so when they were deposited by the dinosaur, then they would be left across all of the landscape. And if this happened multiple times with one dinosaur, you'd have a lot more gastroliths than you had dinosaurs. And I've collected those before. You pick them up on the desert. They do have a very unusual shine to them. My question always was, and I can't debate Lee, he has a lot more knowledge about this than I have, and I just read his paper about it. He says there undoubtedly are stomach stones from dinosaurs, and how they got in the layers where they are, away from where the bones were, I'm not sure. So there are questions about that. Yes?
A lot of the modern geologists dispute that.
Yes. Yes. And to counter that, there are some skeletons they found where there was a little pile of gastroliths inside the rib cage of the dinosaur when they dug him up. That's happened in several instances. So a lot of things that happened, some things that happened, a few things that happened 140 million years ago we don't know yet, but most things we do. Yes?
Have they really come to a definitive, in the minds of the experts, definitive story about why it's where it is and why they were deposited that way, or is it still, thinking?
The discussions and arguments go on, and there are arguments on all sides in all cases. Some people think that the dinosaurs died upriver in these meandering streams, and just by flowing down the rivers, all the bones came apart and became disarticulated. The mud hole idea, the last remaining mud hole during a drought period is one idea. They all came to have the last meal, and they were the last meal. And they just don't know.
Or is anyone trying to figure it out?
Lots of people have thought about it and wondered about it. Lots of people have had ideas. I'm anxious to hear yours. We just don't know. We just don't know.
It's that site has always been underappreciated, particularly by the agency that was managing the resource. And I know the county, I worked for the county 30 years ago, and we we're working to try to get support to build something that would be akin to what's at Thanksgiving Point now, where folks could come in one end, walk through and see where the excavation was actually occurring, and maybe on the other side a display of what the latest theory was as to what it was like back in the day. But you can see, 30 years now hasn't changed that much out there.
Yeah. We can understand the environment. We kind of know what that was like, the kind of plants that lived then, and the meandering stream thing. But why they all accumulated there and settled there, and why there are not more examples of other species, we don't really know. There were Stegosaurus and there were Camptosaurus and a few other things, Apatosaurus or Brontosaurus, but they were much smaller in number, much smaller in number than the Allosaurus.
What about that theory of the asteroid hitting Bay of Mexico? And that there was a layer of iridium all around the Earth that caused.
Well, there was a Cretaceous seaway and the Jurassic seaway that came up kind of through the mid-continent. And where we are on the Colorado Plateau, we were on the western side of that seaway. On the eastern side was the Midwest and New York and all that stuff. And so this land that we lived on really had two beachfronts. The eastern beachfront where we are, the western beachfront where the current Pacific is. And we know that much about the history. Yes?
Do you know what we have in the museum across the street? Is it a complete, or is it plaster of Paris?
I don't really know for a fact, but I would guess it's probably 80 or 90% complete, and the rest filled in with plaster of Paris.
What about in most museums you see dinosaurs? How complete are they with real bones?
Well, probably the Allosaurus is the one that tops the list for being completeness. Other species, maybe 10% real bone and 90% plaster of Paris. And I always wondered how they can pick up one bone and see that it's different from this guy, but is it a whole new species and does it get a whole new name? And often it does, Okay, if nothing else. I guess I did a good job in talking to you if you don't have any questions.
That was wonderful. We sure learned a lot, didn't we? Okay, so we don't have a meeting in May because of all the other million things that go on in May. But we will get the opportunity on the 21st of June to actually trek out to the dinosaur quarry. So we hope that you'll all mark that on your calendars and prepare for that.
What date again?
21st of June, it's the third Saturday.
The date may not be that. There's still a possibility they'll close it down for construction.
Oh, okay.
In June, so we'll have to kind of
we'll
wait and see on that. If that's likely to happen, we may try to have to do something in May.
Okay.
We'll keep you posted if you're on the email list. If you aren't, then talk to Francis.
Then you better get on the email list so you'll be informed. That would be great. Also, if we do go out, if you have one of these little passes that you've purchased before as you've gone through the parks, that will be good at the quarry. We do try to keep track of what goes on in the Price Historical Society because they have some wonderful programs as well. And next Thursday, a week from tonight, they're going to be discussing winter quarters. And so that will be something that we probably will want to be involved in. Okay, we have refreshments in the back. Give them just a second to get that set up. And we thank you so much for your attendance tonight. And hopefully we'll see you again soon. Thank you.